Okay, we've looked at PLCs, we've looked at what call this the basics. Now we've also looked at latching. Now I want to tackle some basic programs. Just saying basic programs. Now these basic programs basically I'm gonna look at the gates. Let me rather say logic gates. These are most basic programs, the logic gates. Alright. Let me start there with I'll do it in one platform. When someone wants to look at it, they can always freeze the screen or replay or whatever. So let's start with the not gate. Not gate. All right. Let's have our oh no. And I need. All right. There's something that I've not been mentioning. The end statement. I have not been putting the end statement. Why? Because really the end statement is now redundant. Uh, most PLCs, when you program them, the end statement is always assumed. When you stop programming, the PLCs would remember this is the age of AI. Even before that, even before AI, you've been drawing close towards AI. Once your PLC sees there's nothing else, it assumes an end statement. So I've not really been putting the end statement. Going forward, I think let me put the end statement so people are not confused. Like in theory situations, still get people who insist on the end statement. So I'll include the end statement. So let's save, for instance, the end statement traditionally would tell the PLC the program is done. This is the last rung, so go back to the top. So now the not get is simply um, a normally closed contact. Let's call this, I said I will call it X's and I's willy-nilly because I don't want people to latch onto a specific form of terminology. These PLCs are going to differ, right? If I'm using X's now, you could say probably I'm looking at that PLC there because this PLC here, the other way around, this PLC here is using inputs there. I don't know if that's going to be clear enough, but I've shown this before. These are X's and outputs are what? Are actually still. Oh, the outputs are Y's here. Alright, for the delta, the outputs are actually Y's. So this is X's and Y's. So I'll assume that PLC and I'll say, okay, my first input there is X0, my output is Y0. So I'll assume X0 and Y0. Just to show you, it's the same way. Does not matter which PLC you are using. The nomenclature is dependent on the what on the on the PLC. Now, if I do this, you can see that without any activation, that run is already closed. That because XO is normally closed, so that run is already closed. So therefore, Y0 is actually on as we speak. Now, when you energize XO, when you energize that input there, what then happens is that this will break. When it breaks, this goes off. So if you want to have power, you must not energize XO. Therefore, this will be what? And then I will put my end there to say my end statement to say the PLC must go back. It's really redundant these days. Nobody really, the modern PLCs, either they automatically have the end on their own as the program, the end keeps shifting down, or there's no end at all. The PLC is programmed already to know when it says the last rung, there's nothing else, it knows it's the end and it goes back to the top. All right, but for some really religious people who really believe things should be done this one way, let's consistently have our end statement now. Going forward, I'll be putting the end statement. So this here is the not get. Should you want to have power on Y0, you would not engage or touch what call this XO. You do not energize XO. That there is our not gate. Now you would remember that there is what I called the buffer earlier, the buffer. And what did I say with the buffer? I said, and I will repeat myself, that this here will be like a buffer if If I say, if I energize XO, that will energize. If I de-energize XO, that de-energizes. So basically, the buffer and the what? And the are mere opposites, are mere inverses, all right, of each other. The buffer and the not, or the buffer and the inverter. Remember, the not is also called the what? The inverter. All right, thanks. I think let me tackle. I don't know whether that's not going to be boring. I want to tackle this one by one because some get lengthier than others. Let me say that was our not gate.